Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview, where we take a look at the stories being followed in the upcoming edition of the North Coast Journal. I'm your host, Dave Frank, and I'm joined by Thad Greenson, news editor, North Coast Journal's news editor. Welcome, Thad.
Hi, Dave. How you doing?
Pretty good, hanging in there. So much craziness going on in the world. I'm looking forward to touching base with you and getting some feedback on what's been going on in our community. I guess, I would be remiss if I didn't say COVID is one of the biggest things in the news, but of course there's also Afghanistan's situation. So everyone's got a heavy heart these days. What's going on? What's the latest news on COVID in how it's affecting us?
Yeah, the latest news, David, is not great. It's I think for weeks now, public health officials have been warning about the surge that we're going through, fueled by the Delta variant, and and warning that it was really threatening hospital capacity, or at least would come to eventually. And because hospitalizations usually trail 2 to 3 weeks after case numbers, we're really starting to see our hospitals getting impacted right now. And so just over the last week, we've heard from officials that we're seeing our hospitalizations and hospital census and ICU beds especially kind of increasingly taken up with COVID patients. And in the last week, we've really heard from officials that it's taking a toll. And the hospitals have started to cancel first elective procedures, and then now they're canceling non-emergency procedures. So that's even folks waiting for cancer surgeries and heart surgeries and things like that. Not cosmetic things that are now being canceled and postponed. And we've seen haven't gotten an exact number, but what officials have described as a high number of critically ill patients transferred out of the area for care too. And, of course, our numbers have continued to go up. There's some hope that maybe they plateaued a little bit, but they're still, 5-6 score larger than what we were seeing, during the surge in December and January. And so, those hospitalizations are going to continue. And our hospital is going to continue to be impacted for some weeks at least now, which is kind of a scary prospect.
Yeah, and this is from the beginning, this was sort of the benchmark of public health, remedies is, we need to try to mitigate overwhelming hospitals' capacity. And it sounds like that's a tripwire that we're right up against now. One of the things that you pointed out, I think, is that there are staffing issues that are in part impacting this reality. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I think that especially early on in the pandemic, there was kind of this acute focus on hospital beds. How many ICU beds do we have? How many hospital beds do we have in the entire county? And, over time, it became really clear to us at the Journal anyway, that the number of beds doesn't really matter how many beds you have if you don't have enough trained professionals to staff them. And that was really going to be the limiting factor for Humboldt County. And that's, that's where we are is, and Humboldt County has always had a challenge of getting healthcare professionals to come and stay here. Staffing in the best of times is a challenge and somewhat limited here. And then, what we've seen over the last 18 months is, and not just locally, this is a national trend, but is just attrition in the healthcare industry. That and so a lot of that's COVID related, and some of it's just retirements, but. I think the nationwide, the healthcare staffing in general has dropped by like 100,000 people over the last 18 months. And so Humboldt County is feeling that too. In non-pandemic times, Humboldt County relies on traveling nurses a fair bit to kind of bridge that gap between their staff nurses and what they actually need. And that we just don't, that's not a resource that's available right now. Those traveling nurses are all going to the most acute surge places in the country where they're desperately needed. And So Dr. Roberta Luskin-Hawk at St. Joe's, the CEO there, said, pretty clearly that they've put out the call for extra staff from staffing agencies that they use, and have been told by everybody nobody's coming. There's nobody to send at this point. And so what we've been told, and we're kind of working to try to get a story together about more specifically what's going on at St. Joe's, which deals with the bulk of COVID patients, but is that that the reason they're canceling non-emergency surgeries and stuff isn't to keep those beds, but it's to get those staff members over caring for COVID patients, and to really free up kind of all existing hands on deck, so to speak. And I think there's some numbers that I crunched in the story that I wanted to just mention to folks. I think it's really easy for people to just get numbed to case numbers. We report them every day. They kind of keep going up. I think there's some alarm with that, but I also think, like I said, there's just kind of a bombarding or numbing effect. But to put kind of the surge that we're dealing with now in some perspective, we've seen more than 1,500 cases confirmed through the first 24 days in August, and so that's a quarter of the cases that Humboldt County has recorded over this 18-month pandemic. Is just in the last 24 days. 20% of the hospitalizations we've had to date in the pandemic have come over the last 24 days, and 15% of the fatalities have come over the last 24 days. And so what we're seeing now is totally unlike the previous surges we've been going through. And, it's also important to note that there's the guardrails that were in place before of, business requirements and, not allowing sit-down dining or movie theaters to be open and those kinds of things, are off. And it's really the officials have decided that the tool to control this virus is masking, yes, but then is vaccination. And we still have, I think last I checked, which is yesterday, we had a full vaccination rate of 52% of the population. So there's lots of unvaccinated folks out there. And lots of folks, for whatever reason, that are reluctant to get their shot. And I think I was actually taken by something that Steve Madrone said, the 5th District Supervisor at Tuesday's meeting, was just kind of imploring people who haven't gotten the shot to really, not really trying to convince them, those folks who are vaccine hesitant, but just saying, be aware. And if you haven't gotten the shot, then really be mindful about staying home as much as possible, limiting your exposure in public places, and really making sure you're masking up and following all the guidelines when you are out. Because, the data just shows overwhelmingly that those are the folks exponentially more at risk of severe illness.
And, thank you for that. That number stood out, that a quarter of the cases for the entire, year and a half plus, year and 9 months or whatever. It's a blur, but that's just in the last 3 weeks and a few days. So we're at a different phase than we've been at before. And depending on how you look at it, like the one metric that you've pointed out over these months has been how many cases per 100,000 residents, so that we could put things in perspective. Like Southeast United States, where it's just a catastrophe and hospitals are fully overwhelmed. Various counties there are as many as like 1 in 30 people in the community are getting COVID each day. We have a county just to the north of us, two in Oregon, but one in Del Norte County is up there in the top 25 worst counties in terms of that count in the whole country. They're our neighbors. Like we mingle with those people. So that's, I just want to reiterate that it's not some foreign problem. It's on our doorstep, and in fact, we need to, people that have not that to be preachy, but people just need to take a look in the mirror and think about being proactive at this point. I think that's the message from public health, and that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I think we're also going through the surge right at a time when school-age kids are either just coming back into school or about to come back into school. And so I think that the community has been very clear that we want kids in school. And if we want to keep our kids in school, then, we need to bend the curve. Keep our hospital admitting patients and keep kids in classroom instruction, then it's up to each of us to really think about our behaviors and act accordingly.
Well, thank you for the update on COVID. It's a little distressing, but I mean, we have to be pragmatic about it. So I'm sure that to be continued. We're going to follow this as it unfolds and continues to unfold. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so let's transition now to another article that is in the journal this week, and that's about another upcoming pending mini crisis, so to speak, is the recall election. That's right on our doorstep, just two weeks away. What can you tell us about your coverage of that this week?
Yeah, we just have a very short story about the recall. We figured there's lots of places that folks can get their state news, but we wanted folks to be aware that the recall is looming, that those ballots are probably in your mailbox if you haven't gotten them already, and to make sure that folks understand how the recall works. A recall is kind of an odd election. It's not something that I think most people have a ton of experience in, although those who were old enough to vote back in 2003 got a taste. But So essentially, the ballot will have two questions on it. One is, should Gavin Newsom be recalled, Governor Newsom? And the second is, if so, who should replace him? And so everybody gets to vote on those two questions. So even if you think Newsom's doing a fine job or shouldn't be recalled and vote no on the first question, you still can vote on the second, which is that if he is recalled, who should his replacement be? And it's, like I said, it's an odd election structure because it's very possible that if Newsom does get recalled, if 50% or more of voters decide that he should not be the governor anymore, it's very possible that he will actually, get more votes than whoever replaces him. There's a list of, I think it's 46 candidates vying to replace him. And so, say there's a scenario where 48% of people think he should not be recalled, but 41% do. And then the highest vote getter among those 46 replacement candidates gets, 20% of the vote or something. You'll have a candidate who 20% of the public voted for when 48% felt like the old governor should stay in office, which is kind of a weird dynamic.
Oh, speaking of that dynamic, one of the elements of your article, which I think is really worth exploring, reiterating or highlighting, is that all of the governors since you could tell us the exact year, but most of the recent governors have faced recalls, if not one, more than one. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I didn't realize that before researching the story, but yeah, since 1960, every California governor has faced at least one recall effort. And of course, most of those have never gotten on the ballot. And Newsom himself faced 5 recall efforts before this one. So recall is something that is always apparently active in California gubernatorial politics anyway, although it just very, very rarely reaches that threshold of getting enough signatures to get on the ballot. So the last time was Governor Gray Davis was recalled, like I said, back in 2003, and then Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger was elected to replace him. And that was in the midst of a budget crisis and all that stuff. And this time, another thing that I thought was interesting is that Newsom's approval ratings have been pretty solid throughout his tenure as governor, and actually got better during the pandemic. So I think he was polling at about 49% of registered voters approved of his job performance, like in his first month of office, and then that has kind of just steadily risen since, up to I think it was 52% in January of this year. But to recall a governor, I think you will need signatures from about 12% of voters who voted in the last gubernatorial election. And so it seems like the pandemic and his handling of it, and the institution of lockdowns and stuff like that, and his very unfortunate dining out, which I think was very highly publicized. I think it was a birthday party or something he attended. But anyway, that kind of created the perfect storm where his detractors, after 5 failed attempts to get a recall on the ballot, got enough signatures to get it on the ballot.
So yeah, interestingly, the California Patriot Coalition that started this petition, they started before COVID, but the support developed after the response to COVID. That was a public health response. So I think that's sort of an interesting dynamic.
They also got a very controversial extension on the window of signature gathering. So according to recall, I don't remember exactly how many days it is, but once you get kind of a certified recall petition, you only have so many days to collect that 12% of gubernatorial voter signatures in order to get it on the ballot. And they hadn't done that, and they went to a judge. I don't remember where. It was somewhere in the Central Valley, and kind of pleaded their case that it's a pandemic and it's harder to gather signatures because you can't just go stand in front of the grocery store or whatever. And the judge agreed and gave them, an extension of a certain number of days, and then they were able to get enough votes or enough signatures to get it on the ballot.
So there's more in the article. Thank you for the update. And also I should add that Access Humboldt produced a video, California Recall Election 2021 FAQ, frequently asked questions. So it's California Recall Election 2021 FAQ. And if you just do a Google search for Access Humboldt with that in the name, you'll get this video, which is like a little tutorial explaining a little bit about it.
Yeah, and I will just add a quick plug too. Cal Matters, which can be found online at calmatters.org, has done a wonderful series of profiles of all the major candidates. And so if you want to educate yourself on exactly who those 46 people are running, that's a good spot to do it.
Right on. I'm definitely going to check it out because I haven't seen that yet myself. So finally, we're going to transition now to Mural Makeover, the arts and features, but also the cover story. So tell us a little about what happened at the Eureka Street Art Festival.
Yeah, so this is I love this story. I've loved it each of the years they've done it. This was the 4th annual Eureka Street Art Festival. But it is this very grassroots effort to, which is steadily expanded, but is to make over the city of Eureka and kind of embrace, this identity as kind of an artist capital and a place where art comes to thrive. And so this was, like I said, the 4th one, and they installed, I think, 11 new murals over the course of a week. And so this year, the pandemic has put a little bit of a damper on it because usually, it's a week-long process where folks are doing these very public murals, and members of the public can go watch them kind of as they're in progress and watch them progress through the week. But then it would culminate in kind of a big weekend-long street fair where there's all kinds of art activities for kids and public art displays like glass blowing and different things like that. And so that didn't happen this year, which is a little bit of a bummer. But the murals themselves are fabulous, and over 4 years now, the festival has contributed, I think it's 41 murals to Eureka. And it's really been fun to kind of watch, to see them pop up, and then they're really starting to transform the look of the city and the feel of the city.
Well, in your cover story, there's a map that shows everybody where they are and, who did them, giving credit to the artists. Most of them are clustered around Broadway, 4th and 5th. Do you have any sort of observations about any of them in particular, or the process, or, the photographer who covered it for you? Any kind of angle of the murals themselves? Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, they focus on a different area of town each year, and so this year they really wanted to focus on the 101 corridor and really kind of focus on the first things that visitors see when they're passing through town. Recognizing, I think that they have 30,000 vehicle trips on the 101 corridor every day, you mentioned the photographer who I was remiss in not saying earlier. It's Alexander Woodard, who's just a brilliant photographer and really has a knack for capturing kind of busy, big landscapes. And so he's got all kinds of wonderful pictures with interesting angles of folks up on scaffolding working on murals, or down from angling up from the ground, and really did a fantastic job. So I'm really thankful that Alex did this for us. And as far as murals that I want to highlight, I think they're all so fantastically different and all so cool. So I really encourage folks to tear out that map and kind of do the tour and take them in for themselves. But there are two that are kind of profound, and I really want to highlight. They are, well, the first is commemorating the Eureka Chinatown project, which is a really interesting project. I urge folks to check out their website and kind of find the whole backstory of it. But it's really trying to make sure that the history of Eureka's Chinatown and Eureka's Chinese Expulsion Act aren't forgotten. And so they got an artist from the Bay Area to come up and paint a mural that he titled Foul, which has kind of interesting meaning, but is a duck, which I'm blanking on the specific type. I think do you remember, David? It's the Mandarin duck.
The Mandarin duck. There you go.
Symbol of love and fidelity.
Exactly, in Chinese culture. And so that's kind of the centerpiece of the mural. And then behind it is kind of an old, is a painting of what Chinatown looked like when it was in Eureka. And then there's a portrait of Ben Chin, who passed away a couple years ago, I believe, but was a well-known restaurateur in Eureka, and is credited anyway with being the first Chinese person to legally come back after the Chinese Expulsion Act in Eureka. So it's kind of a pivotal figure in Eureka's history. So it's a really beautiful mural, and it's the start of this much larger kind of project to bring back a Chinatown and make sure that this history isn't forgotten, which I think is really cool. And the other one that has kind of an added cultural significance is in Opera Alley. So it's off the 101 corridor. It's one of the only murals this year that's off the corridor. But it's an Opera Alley, and it's against the Clark Museum. And it is a mural inspired by a poem by Brian Tripp, a very renowned Karuk elder and artist. It is inspired by, like I said, his poem that said, "The sun set on the people twice that day," and it's a poem kind of commemorating the Tuluwat Island massacre of 1860. So it was actually the mural was originally done by Brian and I think his son Jasper, and was on display in Eureka for a while, and then was taken down when the building that it was on underwent renovations. And this whole team of artists, led by a Yurok painter, has restored the mural in Opera Alley, and it's a really beautiful painting. And it's not up yet, but they're going to put a plaque with the inscription of Brian Tripp's poem on next to it, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, so there's, like I said, there's photos available in the article and also online, I'm sure. So definitely encourage folks to check it out. And I like your idea of tearing the map out of the journal itself, and getting out there and making sure you kind of can take your little mini tour, since the festival is not what it ordinarily is.
Yeah, and I'd encourage folks, we didn't print the entire map, but the Eureka Street Art Festival website has a map of the 30 murals that were painted in previous years too, and so you could make a full day of it, or just kind of peck away and do a little at a time. But they're all worth seeing. I think they've all really added to the city's the city's vibe and feel.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Thad. That's about going to do it for us this week. North Coast Journal is available on newsstands now. Pick one up. Stay informed. Also available online anytime. Thad, till next time, take care.
Thanks, David.